Welcome, everybody, to the NFL Prediction Show on the Grueling Truth. And Steve, you worry, you just won't write. I am your host, Mike Goodpaster. The Grueling Truth is always powered by betting.net. Betting.net is your best bet for finding the online casino or sportsbook that's right for you. Make sure you check them out at betting.net. Right now, I'd like to welcome in my co-host for the NFL Prediction Show. First up, Joe Spillman. How you doing, Joe?
I'm in mourning, Mike. That's all I got to say. I'm not doing well.
All right.
Can I say something though before?
No, because you said that's all I have to say.
Yeah, I lied.
Obviously.
Before we get going with this show, I want to let the entire viewership know that the fans in Kansas City have the lowest football IQ I've ever experienced, and they are the most vile human beings on the face of this earth.
You've never been to Philadelphia. All right. Next up, we've got Steve Risley. How you doing, Steve?
Doing great.
And then we've got NFL beat writer Dan Kornhauser. How you doing, Dan?
I'm doing good. I'm doing real good. I know I picked Cincinnati, but I'm so finally happy Mahomes got that proverbial monkey off his back.
He's still 1-3, Dan. That's not a monkey off his back. He's 1-3 against Burrow.
And he doesn't have a monkey on his back because he won a Super Bowl.
Nobody
won a Super Bowl.
You sound like a Kansas City fan already because they're talking shit. He's 1-3 against Burrow. He's won one game against Burrow. When Mahomes gets to 500 against Burrow, then the whole world can talk shit. He didn't get no damn monkey off his back. He got help from officials, and he won a damn AFC title. He was gifted a damn game. He didn't get no monkey off his back. The NFL wrapped a little present for him and said, here you go, Mahomie. You're the poster child for the NFL. Why don't you go on and play in the Super Bowl at State Farm fucking Stadium? He didn't get no damn monkey off his back. He was gifted a win.
So he didn't play.
He was gifted a win.
Well. He didn't play well. He didn't throw for over 300 yards on your vaunted defense. He didn't pick up key third downs when he needed to.
He was gifted. You know what? He picked up a key third down. He picked up a key third down on a redo.
And he didn't beat you guys without his top three wide receivers.
Wait a second.
He was gifted a win. He was gifted a win.
Hold on. I don't want to hear crap about injuries unless you're a 49ers fan. Because the Chiefs during this game lost 6 players. The Bengals lost 4 players. Patrick Mahomes won with Travis Kelce and nobody else's receiver.
Nope.
Joe Burrow played a decent game with no offensive line. They're by far the 2 best quarterbacks. There's no monkey to get off your back when you've already won a Super Bowl, Joe. There's just not. He's won a Super Bowl. Right now, the ball is in Joe Burrow's court. He didn't win it. And I'm sorry, Joe. I'm going to ask you one simple question. You give me an honest answer. All right? That simple question is this. Who played better, Burrow or Mahomes?
Mahomes did.
Okay, then shut up.
No,
this game was lost.
Gifted to win.
No, they
weren't. He was gifted the win.
They were not.
They were.
How were they gifted a win? Okay, so let me ask you this.
The final punt return with 1:26 left on the clock, there was a huge block in the back that was just blatantly missed.
Who punted the ball 35 yards on a line drive so it could be returned?
You still missed the block in the back, right in front of an official.
Wait a second. Drew Crispin screwed the punt up. Why don't we bitch about that?
Well, it should have went back 10 yards from where it was caught.
Oh. Well, I'll tell you what, Joe. There was a touchdown by the Kansas City Chiefs that was called back because of a hold. If the game was rigged, why would they not call that back?
Shit, Mike, I don't know. I just know on the final.
Let me ask you this. You've coached Pee Wee football, right?
Yeah.
Have there ever been bad officials?
Every official in Pee Wee football is terrible, Mike.
Okay, now, I can tell you this. High school football. I coached high school football for 27 years. All the officials suck.
We're talking about the NFL, though.
No, I know. I'm talking about arena football, which were some NFL officials, and they sucked, Joe. I don't want this bullshit narrative. It was fixed. I mean, I can say this. If it's fixed, why does Washington, D.C. suck all the time?
Did I say? I never said the NFL was fixed. I said Mahomes was gifted a win.
He was gifted a win because
he was gifted a win. I didn't say the game was fixed, and I'm not going to play that narrative either.
Okay, so if you want to play that, when the Bengal blocks the Raven in the back on the Sam Hubbard dash to win the game.
Well, and that was questionable. That was
questionable. My ass.
Yeah,
it
that was
not
questionable. That was questionable.
He hit him in the
because
back.
he made initial contact on the front side of his shoulder. That's questionable.
No, that's bullshit. Hold on, let's find the play. I mean, I just don't buy this. Steve, how about you?
No, I think bad plays are a part of football. I mean, missed calls are a part of the game.
Okay, I was looking for a video, Steve. You're supposed to talk longer than that.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I'm just going to tell everybody we just had an earthquake while Joe was talking and ranting. We just had a 2.9 earthquake right here about 5 miles from my house in Slimar. How about that?
Okay,
I felt it.
This is what we're going to do, Joe. We're going to pull up.
You're not gonna pull up anything to change my mind about the final drive of that game.
I'm talking about the Ravens game.
I don't give a shit about I don't give a shit about the Ravens game.
No, you don't, because you were the beneficiary of bad officiating. What I want you to do is explain to me how this is not a block in the back. And it's just an honest question. If you can explain it, I'll be good with it. All right, we're going to pull this up right now.
Here we go.
Can everybody see it?
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it?
Yeah.
All right. So, number 89, Mark Andrews is chasing, right? I don't know why the same plan. Okay, so you show me where he contacts him in the front. That's
right
not
there.
In the front.
Right
That's
there.
not in the front.
His hands are clearly on the front side of his shoulders, Mike.
Oh, okay. So he doesn't push him in the back. Because I'm sorry to tell you this, but even if he contacts him in the front, he can't push him in the back.
You know football as well as anybody. If you make contact in the front and you keep contact, that's not a block in the back. His initial contact was to the front of the shoulders.
Can you show me?
Can you show me
the rule? Wait a second. See, you're telling me.
I'm telling you.
Wait a second. So that means on that last play, which we'll get to again, is against the Chiefs, where all the Bengal fans were crying about hold, and it was a hold. He contacted him in the front initially, and the guy went around him and he grabbed him. So does that mean that's not hold?
Mike, he kept contact on that player the entire time, and holding is clearly different than a block in the back.
It is?
Yes.
How's it different?
Because if you spin out of a block and you get grabbed from behind, that's a hold.
Yeah.
So
that was not a block in the back.
So the Bengals don't have any culpability in that last play. Everybody did everything right.
Looking at that closely, that's not a block in the back. He made initial contact.
Dude, we just looked at
shoulders.
So we'll do this. Steve, was that a block in the back?
He definitely hit him in the back. But the question I have for you, hold on, Mike.
He didn't hit him in the back?
Yeah, he did push him. He did get ahead of him. It did put his hand on the front side of his shoulder pad, but then it reverted back.
It maintained contact. That's not a block in the back.
I would call that a blatant. I would call that a blatant block in the back.
Oh, bullshit, Steve. That's not a block in the back. He hit the front of the player and maintained contact. That's not a block in the back. Mike, you know that.
I know this. If on a punt return, I'm telling you this. If that would have been the Ravens doing it to the Bengals, you'd be screaming here that he blocked him in the back.
Blocked him in the back. Yep, I agree.
So
there.
let's go to the play.
Hold on.
Go ahead. Oh yeah, Dan, I forgot to ask you.
Dan.
What do you think?
I was going to say
nobody really cares what Dan thinks. So go ahead.
To the point here, it might more in fact be an illegal peel back block, which is when an offensive player can't initiate contact on the side /
That's not a peel back block, Dan. That is nowhere close to a peel back block. You have to get out in front of the player and then come back to.
All right, let's go to the next play because Dan, you're a dumbass. All right, let's see. But it's still blocking it back. All right, a review later. Okay, so this is my problem with
Dan,
this.
you're
one.
no dumbass, Dan.
He's a dumbass. He's my dumbass, though, so don't talk to him like that. Don't be condescending.
Thanks.
Let's see. All right. So now, my first concern here is this the left tackle offside? Nobody ever brings that up, do they?
No, never. Ever.
So chill out, Joe. I'm not against you. I'm just fucking with you.
I didn't say that.
Next. Right here. No hold yet. This is it. Can you see my pointer?
Yep.
Sam Hubbard's right here, right? He's the DN.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Sam Hubbard's still at the end. Everybody's in contained, right? You got 4 guys. Everybody's in the way it's supposed to be.
There's a hold right there.
There's a hold right there. Now,
Yep.
there is also right here Sam Hubbard losing contain. I'm sorry, if Sam Hubbard stays up here, this run never happens because you got one guy here, a guy here, you got a corner here, and a safety over here if you watch the All-22. So I feel bad for Joseph Asai because I don't this is that bad of a late hit. Number one, he's a yard out of bounds and you're running like hell. But if Sam Hubbard is in contain right here, they're not getting past the blue line, much less the yellow line. The game goes to overtime. I mean, that is bad football by Sam Hubbard. I'm sorry, it just is. The other thing is this. I think you had a mistake up top. Is that number 21? If you watch Twitter, when it's pretty obvious Mahomes is not going to throw the ball.
Mm-hmm.
The initial contact is maybe a yard out of bounds. Everybody says it's 5, but it's not. It's a yard. Now, if you want, I don't know if y'all have seen it or not, we could go back to the play where T. Higgins gets plowed 4 yards out of bounds towards the goal line. That wasn't called.
Mm-hmm. That stands out.
Yeah. And should a NFL official? I mean, because
I
really,
think you had offsetting penalties there.
Well, I think also if Sam Hubbard does his job, it never happens anyways. So my
I
point
agree.
was,
And number 71,
job,
the left. If you go back and watch that entire game, the left tackle, number 71, Kansas City Chiefs. I don't know his name off the top of my head. He's offsides 3/4 of the play. 3/4 of the plays that they run, he false starts.
Yeah. Well,
and
we also saw that in
time.
other games where it doesn't get called if it's bang bang because it's. But my whole point with this entire thing is this: for Bengal fans that want to bitch and whine about we got screwed and the NFL's rigged. I'm not saying the NFL's not rigged. I'm not saying you didn't get screwed. What I'm saying is this: if you don't want officials to play a part, leave no doubt and play well. The Bengals brought their C game. The Chiefs brought their B game. The Bengals lost. I can deal with that. I know I wrote an article, the NFL is rigged. I do have an opinion on this, though, that does say that the NFL is rigged a little bit. But I don't think this is scripted. I think it's impossible to script it. I think in the end, the Chiefs outplayed the Bengals. They deserved to win the game. And I can also tell you this, the Ravens outplayed the Bengals, and they didn't win the game. And I'm not talking about the block in the back. I'm just saying, in general, if you don't want the officials to matter, put it like this, Joe. I know you've been in a situation before where you're playing high school football or coaching your junior high team or your Pee Wee team, and you go into the game telling your kids, we have to play really well because you know you're not going to get a call there. Right?
To be honest with you, Mike, as a football coach, I actually don't put anything on the officials during the game. I don't teach that.
I'm not saying during the game. I'm saying before the game.
I really don't talk about officiating before the game either.
This is the thing. I would suggest you do, because if you do and they expect it, they're less likely to react badly to it.
The only thing I ever say about officiating while playing a game or coaching is if I have a defensive lineman complaining about being held, I tell them that we hold too, and they're not calling that. So
really, I tell mine to take their arms and try to break the other kid's wrist because they're not supposed to hold you.
That's something you work on.
Come on, Joe. I know you ain't like that. You were coached by me, son.
Yeah.
Come on.
Well, and so I'll say this: why I am deeply, deeply upset about the Bengals' loss in the AFC Championship game. I do agree, setting my emotions aside, that Kansas City played a better game. I'm not taking back what I said about their fans. Last year, I went to that AFC Championship game. I thought that they were very gracious hosts. I thought that they maintained class this year.
This is the thing.
They were vile, disgusting human beings this year.
They should have been. I mean, you got the mayor of Cincinnati talking shit about their quarterback. You've got the players talking shit.
Set that aside.
It's football. It's supposed to be violent. Have fun. Nobody shot you.
You're right. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. But you shouldn't be walking through the stadium and having a grown man tell your 8-year-old to suck his dick. So
that's fucked up.
Yeah,
Was
that
that a
is
Catholic
not.
stadium?
Yeah, that's not okay. Yeah, that's what I thought. So
Yeah,
you
but
know,
you always have. Hey, put it like this, Joe. The only way to eliminate that is eliminate alcohol sales at the game.
right. So or maybe not drink 9 hours before a game at 6:00.
But
I
everybody
don't.
does.
And so, but I will say the Bengals had the ball with a minute 40 seconds left to go in Joe Burrow's hands, and they weren't able to get it done. So at the end of the day, they had a chance to win that game. Poor officiating aside, I do think that at the very least, officiating caused that game not to go to overtime. But the Bengals could have got it done before it even got to that point, and they weren't able to do it. So at the end of the day, they lost the game. I understand. I have enough football knowledge to understand that they didn't play well. I don't think Joe Burrow. You said he played okay. I don't think Joe Burrow played well. I don't think
Played
the play
okay
calling,
with no offensive line. Joe.
I don't think the play calling, and maybe it was because of the offensive line, but we saw a week before that in Buffalo, they were able to establish the run. And I know it's not the same defensive line,
They didn't
but
try to run.
why the Bengals didn't even try to run against Kansas City, and I didn't understand that. So, and they had a lot of 3 and outs, or they had a lot of drives that ended very early. That
Well,
they
and the
didn't
thing that got
they
me,
didn't maintain
Joe,
the clock at all.
the thing that got me, Joe, is the 3rd and 2 where they throw the ball deep with like 6 minutes left in the game, and it gets knocked away. You got to give the ball back to them.
Knocked away and intercepted.
And I'm not going to bitch about Zach Taylor. I think he's a solid coach. But that was bad play calling. Not running the ball was bad play
Steve
calling.
Reiser, I'm not saying Burrow's the reason they lost the game.
Well, you just said you didn't think he played very well. But
I don't think he played the best Joe Burrow game that we've seen.
I'll tell you what about this game. What surprised me is we're talking about Joe Burrow, and Joe, you think he didn't really play quite right, but
dude, honestly, he threw the greatest pass I've ever seen. The one that hit Chasen or Higgins in the head, like 35 yards down the field. Yep. It went behind the Chiefs player's head, curled around and smacked, I think it was Chase or Higgins in the head. I mean, it was an absolutely perfect throw.
But despite him throwing 2 picks, despite their O-line allowing 5 sacks, which was my magic number coming into the game, despite the NFL officials screwing the Bengals on multiple occasions, they could have won this game. And you know what? They probably should have, just to make a statement and spit at the NFL officials and spit at all the haters and all the people talking smack today, this week or after the game. They should have probably won that game. I don't care. Even with the 2 picks, the 5 sacks, the bullshit they dealt with, they were still in that game, and they could have very well won it at the end. Yeah, so even with all that shit going against them, they'll be back, man. They'll be back.
We'll see. I believe they will because Joe Burrow's there. I worry about what everything goes from there. Steve, when we look at this game, what was your biggest takeaway from the game? Because I had a few here. I mean, Chris Jones was awesome, but then again, he's going against like Casper the Friendly Ghost at right guard. But when I looked at this game, Steve, the thing I really took away from this is I think these are the 2 best teams. I think whichever one plays the Eagles beats the Eagles, because I think both of these teams, because they play each other, get tested all the time. The Eagles didn't get tested. Jalen Hurts threw for like 120 yards, and everybody act like he's the second coming of Tom Brady or Joe Montana. But I think this. I mean, when I look at this, Steve, I favor the Chiefs at the Super Bowl. Now, we're not going to give our picks till next week, but what was your takeaway from watching the games this weekend?
Well, I don't have a dog in this fight, so I try and be objective about it. I think what you said is right. You clearly have undeniably the 2 best quarterbacks in the AFC, probably in the NFL.
No, in the NFL.
And I think the 2 best teams got there. For a game to be decided on a sloppy referee's call tells me how even these 2 teams are, because no team beat either team.
They played 4 times, and all 4 games have been decided by 3 points.
Right, and it took a very questionable referee's call to decide the outcome of this game. Whether it was pushed out of bounds or not, I don't know. I mean, with the momentum carrying him and everything, and It looked like he was barely a step out of bounds when he got hit in the back. And then, of course, he falls 5 yards forward because his speed is carrying him. So I discounted that play as really, I didn't think it should be called. But that's just me. Again, not having a stake in this game.
I grew up in the 70s. As long as you're not hitting them in the stands, it should be all right.
No,
Yeah.
I think that was a. So I think that was a hit out of bounds. I think that was a penalty.
Yeah, it was
In
a
my
hit out of
opinion.
But
bounds.
if you look at the film again, the motion to make
Yeah.
the contact had already
Right.
started.
I think what
inbound.
Joe's saying, though, is they always make that call.
Right. Yeah.
And I don't.
But
Yeah.
had the motion not started until after the defensive player got out of bounds, then I'd say you got a clear-cut piss. But this really, the guy was going for him at full speed and lunging while everybody was still in bounds. And then he hits him one step out, and, Mahomes falls 5 yards forward. And my point is not that play, to rehash that play. We've buried that horse. The point is, it took that play to decide the outcome of this game. And I think that's a real step up for both Kansas City and Cincinnati.
Well, not for the Bengals because they won the first three like that.
Well, I listened to Gronkowski talk about that game and about the Super Bowl coming up. And actually, if you listen to Gronk's pretty intelligent. I mean, he's got some pretty good insight into what's going on, much better than I thought he'd be. And he said basically, with Hurts and with Mahomes or with Burrow, they're relying heavily on their quarterback, and their quarterbacks are coming through. We talked about with Kansas City, or I'm sorry, with San Francisco and Philly, that it would come down to which quarterback made the fewer mistakes. And of course, San Francisco loses their quarterback, so Philly wins easily, which they were the better team anyway.
Well, actually, the 49ers quarterbacks made no mistakes because Brock Purdy didn't even throw an incompletion and they lost.
Yeah. But what he said about Mahomes is, and what makes Mahomes and Kansas City so scary is those guys just find a way to beat you.
Well, this is the thing, though. That's the Bengals. I mean, they did it 3 out of 4 times. The Chiefs got one.
And that's why the Bengals,
My opinion on whether the NFL is rigged or not is this. I believe it is. Hear me out. I don't think it's set up where they're going to make sure this team wins. But I think during the season, there are narratives that come to light. They, for some reason, Carl Sheffers, Ron Tolbert, for some reason, are always in the middle of these games, right? I mean, they just are. Ron Tolbert last year at the Super Bowl calls the pass interference, the defensive holding on Logan Wilson, which pretty much decided the game. It could have been 4th and goal at the 7. Instead, it's 1st and goal at the 2. So I think what happens here is it's kind of like when Jordan and Bird and Magic played basketball in the 80s, Steve, where the superstars get a little bit more leniency.
Sure they do. Yeah.
That if Jacoby
LeBron
Brissett is running, nobody cares because the NBA doesn't even exist anymore.
I agree with you 100%.
But when you look at this, if Jacoby Brissett's running out of bounds on that play, they may not call it. And I'm serious about that. They may not. But I think also younger officials see the way the older officials ref the game. I think it's kind of an unwritten rule that, if it gets down to it, we can decide this. We will. If the Bengals beat the Chiefs, that's fine. They got Joe Burrow. Their fan base is crazy right now. They'll go play the Eagles. It'll be a huge game.
Okay.
So I don't think they necessarily control it. But I think that if you let it go down to the last second, especially if you're on the road, it's your own damn fault.
Right.
I mean, if the Bengals play a B game, they win that game.
Yeah. Let me ask a question here. And I'm going to start with Dan, but I'm sure you all got an opinion. I was all going to chime in. Are the penalties too harsh that the bad calls like we got determine the outcome of the game? I mean, should pushing a player out of bounds be a 5-yard penalty instead of a 15-yard penalty? And therefore, you don't get that all of a sudden going from feast or famine to feast off of one dumb play. Should one dumb play be able to determine the outcome of a game.
Wait a second, Risley.
So if we just said,
Wait.
hang on, let me
No,
finish.
Risley, I got to say something to you, Risley. This may be one of the smartest things you've ever said. I'm
Okay.
serious. I've never
Well,
even thought about this before.
Are the penalties just too fucking harsh? Excuse my French. I shouldn't.
Well,
say
I
that
mean,
word on
it
the
makes
air.
sense to me, though, Dan and Joe. I mean, when you got a running into the kicker, if you don't hit the plant leg, it's usually a 5-yard penalty. If you hit the plant leg, it's 15. Dan, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, this
was
is
brilliant, Steve. I never even thought of that. Go ahead.
This is the topic that we've talked about before with the penalties and how
Not
soft.
like that. Don't you try to act like we were told. Steve came up with this bad boy on his own, or he watched it or read it somewhere. But either way,
I came up with that on my own.
Not like
good,
this,
Steve.
but Mike, you've mentioned in the past, and we've talked about this. And Mike, Joe, Steve, we've talked about this, that the NFL is getting soft. The penalties are inconsistent. There's too many of them in key spots, and this AFC Championship game just highlighted everything that's wrong with the officiating. These are supposed to be the two best, theoretically, two or the top two officiating crews in the league. This should be guys who are the best of the best at their respective ref positions in the NFL. Instead, it was an absolute joke. Right. There were not only were there a ton of penalties that were called that were nonsense, but there were calls that didn't happen that should have happened, which you guys alluded to earlier. And Steve, I mean, Steve, you might be onto something. Maybe some of these penalties are too egregious.
Right. Well, Dan, let me ask you this. And again, everybody chime in. Everybody chime in. Should we be able to train these referees that every penalty is a 5-yard penalty unless the referees determine it's a flagrant foul? If it's flagrant, then it's a 10 or 15-yard penalty. But they have to determine, okay, he ran into the kicker with the intent of breaking his damn leg. That's a flagrant foul.
Yeah.
That's 15. He pushed the guy out of bounds with the intent of smashing him into the Gatorade bottles and putting him in the stands. That's flagrant. Otherwise, pushing a guy out of bounds is just a 5-yard penalty. The Chiefs don't get within field goal range, and maybe the Bengals defense holds them, and we go to overtime, and the game's out decided.
And basically, the officials don't decide the game.
The officials don't. It's less of a chance of the officials deciding the game if you made every penalty a 5-yard penalty, except for flagrant fouls. I mean, holding should just be a fucking 5-yard.
No, I don't believe offensive holding should be 10 yards because you're basically you're stopping a sack
on every play.
Well, and they should.
And then they will hold on. They can't. You can't block a defensive end anymore without holding.
Not the way offensive linemen are taught from high school on up. You can't.
Right.
That's the issue.
You basically you got Bosa and Mika Parsons. You can't stop those guys one-on-one. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, but it's still
those guys are
holding is
the
preventing.
Best athletes are in the teams anymore are edge rushers.
A holding is preventing a play from being run. No, if you know, it's letting a play be run.
And
it eliminates a sack. It eliminates a sack. That's probably going to be at least a 10-yard
Then
loss.
Mike say 5-yard penalty, loss of down.
I would just say a 10-yard penalty. I'm fine with that. The personal foul thing, I think makes sense.
But the way
especially
these
out
guys
of bounds.
10 yards is nothing. Mahomes and Burrow both can get you back 10 yards.
Well, I hate to tell you this, though, but Mahomes wouldn't get you back 10 yards in those last 7 seconds and then probably get a field goal off.
He's capable. The better court, I just say 5-yard penalty, loss of down.
Yeah, but then all the Bengals have to do next year is hold on every play and they'll win the Super Bowl because they'll only be called for it probably a third at a time.
So be it. They get good enough to do that.
So, Joe, what do you think about Steve's idea?
So I mean, there would have to be a lot of thought put into that. I agree.
Right.
If you could have 2 separate penalties for face masks, 2 separate penalties for running into a kicker, I don't know why you couldn't have a separate penalty for hitting a player out of bounds, especially if it's just a football play and your momentum carries you that way. But I'll say this, and I did this rant on another show not too long ago, and I'll try not to make it a rant, but the problem with officiating, and it's in every sport from pee-wee football, pee-wee basketball, all the way up to, the professional levels, is consistency. I have no problem. If the officials are going to let things go. If you're going to let interior line holds go, then you're going to let them go. If you're going to let, a touching of the face mask or non-egregious hands to the face
Then
go,
let them all go.
then you got to let them all go. You can't let it go for 3 quarters, just like we saw in the Super Bowl last year, and then decide in the last 2 minutes of the game, we're calling everything.
Mhm.
And you see that all the time. You see it in high school basketball all the time,
Hey,
where
and
nothing
this is
gets
where-
called for 3 quarters, and then it seems like, oh shit, my whistle's been in my pocket the entire game, and I just found it. All I'm going to do is blow this damn thing, and that's what we saw again in the Kansas City game.
Yeah,
All
and
I'm
I'll
going to
say
do is
it
blow
once
this chick
again.
inside of your sex tape.
And I'll say it once again. If it is rigged the way I say, that would make sense. Let the game play out, but if you can help, the Rams win a Super Bowl in LA, you do it. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't think that that's that far-fetched. I think the other issue is this. The NFL should have stayed out of the gambling business, let people bet on it and everything. But when you get in bed with the gambling business, then anybody whose team loses automatically says it's fixed for Vegas or it's fixed for the NFL. And I mean, it's bad business. It's the same reason Pete Rose didn't get in the Hall of Fame. It's because that it brought in the validity of everything you just saw him do. And it brings into the validity just because you're associated with the gambling. I mean, the NFL, I don't have, obviously, there's no issues with my gambling because right now it's not just sports betting, but betting.net compares to best online casinos. Sit back, relax, and play the top online slots, poker, and table games.
Whoa,
But this
what
is the
a
difference.
smooth
You're a
transition
professional.
that was.
But this is the
You are
difference
so
here.
good at that, Mike.
But this is the difference here. The difference here, if you have a business and all of your business is tied to whether people think your game is real or not, which it is. It's like that in every sport. I don't think it's a coincidence that after the Tim Donaghy thing, NBA viewership went down big time. Now, I know a lot of other things brought it down too. It's also not that big of a stretch. It's like the other day, some moron on Twitter with 80 followers tweeted out that Ron Torbord had admitted his son had bet on that game, but he didn't know about it. And I mean, before you know it, I got people I know that are actually legit people who are retweeting this. And I'm like, dude, this guy's got like 80 followers. It's obviously a fake account. The sad thing about it, though, is when I read it, I immediately went to that account to see if it was real or not, because it wasn't that unbelievable to me. That's
Right.
scary. I know that should be something where I'm just going to think, hell, there's no way that happened, if you know what I mean. So Ty Robbins like my slide into the advertising too. But I would suggest to everybody go bet. It's for fun though. Just don't bet your rent.
Yeah.
I mean, especially if you're Joe, because he lives in a freaking mansion in VV, and if he bet his rent, he'd be betting a lot of money all the time.
Yeah.
Ooh, big money Joe.
Big money Joe. All right, let's
don't pay
segue this to the 49ers and the Eagles, which was not much of a game. That's why we saved it for last. I mean, is it safe to say, Dan, that the 49ers or the Eagles had the easiest road to get to the Super Bowl than any team that ever freaking lived? They got to play a New York Giant team that was very limited. It probably shouldn't even been in the playoffs. They played a 49er team without a quarterback. The other thing I think the NFL needs to adjust, and I'll let you comment on this, Dan, also, most teams only carry 2 quarterbacks. Why don't we make it mandatory, a roster spot? Just pay them $150,000 a year to be the mandatory third quarterback on the roster, so crap like we just saw doesn't happen.
That's tough, man.
How's it tough? Do you really want to watch a game where a team has no chance? This isn't like it's high school football. And Christian McCaffrey could come in and take the snap and run the triple option, and we can win the game. The game is over when you have a quarterback that cannot throw.
I mean, how can you hold it against Philly, though? That's not their fault. That's not their
not
problem.
holding it against Philly. I'm holding it against the NFL because Philly only carries 2 too. If Jalen Hurts and Gardner Minshew get hurt in the Super Bowl, I don't care how good their defense is. If they don't have anybody to throw the ball, they're losing. Joe, go ahead.
No, I actually, with the integration or the development that the NFL is going to put into the XFL, however many teams there's going to be there, why don't you select teams that the XFL franchises are going to pay and have them hold a roster spot on NFL teams if they do lose a quarterback. I don't know.
I would think you just sign your own quarterback because the XFL is a joke, anyways.
Can I make a suggestion?
Sure, Steve, go ahead.
Why don't you just expand the damn roster to 54 players?
That's kind of what I just said.
With the 54th player mandatory, it's a quarterback.
That's what I just said, Steve.
Okay, I'm sorry.
That's what I said. They need to make sure that they have an extra mandatory quarterback.
Yeah, the 54th player.
The more I think
about break anybody's bank in the
I'd
NFL.
rather see Brandon Allen try to play quarterback against the Eagles than watch Brock Purdy, who can't throw.
Well, I'd rather have had McCaffrey go in than Purdy be going back in with.
But McCaffrey can't throw.
Well, but neither could Purdy.
I know.
He had
was actually stupid
I mean, to be fair, neither could Jalen Hurts. So
yeah,
I mean,
yeah, but we've got to play the NFL narrative here. Jalen Hurts was awesome. What were his stats, Dan?
You mentioned them earlier. All you got to say is
remember the passing yards. He was 122 passing yards, right?
Yep.
And everybody acts like he just played awesome. What did he run for? Like 200?
So he had 121 passing yards with a 4.8 yard average, which is awful. No touchdowns, a 72.3 QB rating, and he only ran for 39 yards on 11 carries and scored a touchdown.
But yet we're being told how great he played. And during the game, I thought it was great. By the time you get to the middle of the second quarter, where then the narrative turns into, well, he's playing hurt. That was 6 weeks ago. He played against the Giants. Nobody said he looked hurt, did they? No, because he played well because he's playing the Giants defense. I'm sorry. All I can tell you is this. I don't want to give away my pick early, but the Kansas City Chiefs, if they are even remotely healthy, will beat the hell out of Philadelphia because Jalen Hurts will throw 3 picks and fumble once.
I don't think anybody's going to argue with you.
Yeah.
I mean, because I'm sorry, but right now, if I'm the Eagles, I'm seeing if there's a way I could sign Lamar Jackson for the Super Bowl and leave Jalen Hurts' ass at home. I mean, the Jalen Hurts thing gets so overblown. They played a horrible schedule. I mean, they played so many close games against bad teams. I remember they barely beat Steve's Colt by a point. I just don't buy this. I mean, I don't. And if this game's close in the fourth quarter, who in the hell in their right mind is going to bet on Jalen Hurts over Patrick Mahomes? You just don't do it. The only dude that I remember beating Patrick Mahomes at the end of a close game was Tom Brady and Joe Burrow. Jalen Hurts is nowhere near Tom Brady and Joe Burrow.
Hey, Mike, just remember one thing. The Colts did something the Bengals couldn't do. That was they beat Kansas City.
We beat Kansas City this year.
We beat Kansas City this year, too, you
okay.
We beat them by 3. You beat them by 1. And they took us seriously when we beat them.
Touche.
Nice.
Hey, and just remember, the next head coach of the Indianapolis Colts is going to be Brian Callahan, so you'll have a Bengal as your head coach.
No, it's going to be
that hasn't called a play all season.
It'll be Brian Callahan.
It's going to be Jeff Saturday.
It'll be Brian Callahan.
Gross.
Jeff Saturday's the second pick here, but I can tell you this: Peyton Manning endorsed Brian Callahan. Jim Irsay only loves Peyton Manning more than Jeff Saturday. So I think Peyton Manning will get the call there. I think Brian Callahan will be the quarterback or would be the coach. Hopefully it works out like it did for Zach Taylor, where they get a stud quarterback within the first 3 years, or Jeff Saturday may get the job again. You never know.
Hey, I got a question.
Sure.
I know this is a championship weekend recap, but are we going to talk about TB12 retiring?
Yeah, once we get to it. I guess we'll do it now then, because there wasn't much to talk about with the 49ers.
I don't even
what
know
do you want to talk about?
I was just wondering if we were doing it, Mike.
Are you going to shed a tear?
I already did.
Okay. We'll talk about it, Joe.
No, it's, I think
what do you want to talk about? He retired.
I was just wondering if we were going to talk about it, Mike.
We're talking about it right now, Joe. What do you want to say?
I think it's for real this time. I think he's done, and really a hell of a career. I'm glad I got to witness it.
That was awesome. Me too, because the great thing about Tom Brady, if you're a Bengals fan, is that he stopped the Colts and the Steelers from probably winning each 3 or 4 more Super Bowls each. That's why I love Tom Brady, because he stopped the Colts and then he beat Mahomes. Yeah. Steve, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. Well,
that was
no,
awesome.
the Colts couldn't beat the Patriots in their heyday. They lost
Oh,
more times than
I'm
not.
sorry. When I went into that diatribe, I forgot you were a Colts fan.
No, I mean, yeah, I am, but but I
Not so
realize
much
I
now.
realize my team sucks, and it's probably going to suck for the next 4 or 5 years.
Dan, did the Lions ever beat the Patriots?
Probably not. Anytime recently. I don't know, dude.
Let me ask you this, Dan. If you got to select one Tom Brady to put on your team, are you selecting the Tom Brady in his 20s, his 30s, or the early part of his 40s?
30s, because in the 20s he was still in the game manager mode. It wasn't until his 30s where Bill Belichick just gave him the reins, said do whatever you want to do.
That's because that's what Bill Belichick got him wide receivers.
I mean, and Tom Brady was making wide receivers even before he got Randy. He made Wes Welker. He made Troy Brown when Troy Brown was going off for them. Edelman. People are talking about Edelman as a Hall of Famer, but for me, Edelman was a 7th round quarterback out of Kent State. As far as I'm concerned, Tom Brady made him too. So Tom Brady's greatness elevated all these guys around him. Tom Brady made his receivers look good. He made his offensive line look good. I mean, the fact that he barely turned the ball over helped the defense out. He was a perfect piece. I'll take Tom Brady in the 30s, man.
Okay.
Put it on his back. Let him make a team goaty.
So if you had to have any quarterback that ever played to start your team with, would it be Tom Brady, Joe?
Yes.
Dan?
I think so. Yep.
I might go with someone a little more physically appealing, like
why? You want to kiss him?
Maybe. Who knows? It depends how squirrely I'm feeling. But I don't know, maybe like a John Elway or a Steve Young or someone like that. Someone who can
they can't win as much. Yeah.
I mean,
runners don't win.
It's Steve Young.
Yeah. Do you know that he was like 12 years into his pro career when he finally won because he didn't run that much? And also, John Elway won his Super Bowls when he didn't run as much. Steve, would Tom Brady be the guy you take? You're a Colts fan, so I expect you to say Peyton Manning. So
it would be. I mean, Peyton Manning's a very entertaining quarterback. He, in terms of being the ultimate successful quarterback, I don't know, but he was very entertaining to watch. I mean, I would have a tough call between Brady and Joe Montana in his prime.
And I will say I completely agree with Steve, and I would take Joe Montana.
Yeah, I would have a tough time. Montana may be the most underrated great quarterback in the
NFL. He's not underrated because most people don't rank him lower.
No, I said underrated great quarterback. He's in the list of great quarterbacks, but he may be the most underrated one.
I think this. Hear me out. Because anytime I talk to anybody else, but you guys, since you're my friends, I would just say Tom Brady because of the 7 Super Bowls. Joe Montana went to the San Francisco 49ers. They were a mess. Bill Walsh didn't really start him till the end of 1980, middle of 80. 81 was his first complete season. He goes to the Super Bowl, and they upset the Bengals. Bengals turned the ball over 5 times. Niners turned it over 1. What people don't realize is John Taylor and Jerry Rice were not on that team. Jerry Rice wasn't on the Super Bowl 19 team. Super Bowl 16, their leading rusher, I think, ran for like 450 yards. It was Earl Cooper. The second leading rusher was Montana, who ran for like 300. He wins the Super Bowl in 81, 82 strike year, whatever. 83, if you're a Bengals fan and you want to see a team get screwed worse than what the Bengals just did in a championship game, go to the 1983 NFC Championship game. The 49ers got completely screwed in that game. 84, they have maybe the greatest team ever to go 15-1, number 1 offense, number 1 defense, win it all. Here's where I think you can find a difference. Montana only won 4 Super Bowls in like 14 years, right? The difference is this. The competition he had to play was through the roof just to get to the Super Bowl. In the NFC back then, you had the Washington Redskins with Joe Gibbs. You had the Chicago Bears with that defense. You had the New York Giants with Belichick and Bill Parcells coaching them with Lawrence Taylor. I mean, you had the Minnesota Vikings who were always good through the 80s, except for like 1983, 84. And then they go to a championship game. You had all these great teams. You don't have that anymore. When's the
Hey,
last
Mike?
time we saw a great football team?
Mike, let me ask you a quick question. How many of Brady's 7 rings do you give to Belichick?
7, just like I give 7 to Brady. One can't do it without the other. And you could say the same thing about any other quarterback. 6 for Belichick. But also Belichick won, 2 or 3 others as a defensive coordinator, Joe. So Belichick still
you
got
can't
more
count
rings.
that.
But was
can't.
Bill
As a
Walsh
defensive coordinator, you can count.
Nah, you can't count that.
was Bill Walsh in Belichick's league?
Oh, yeah, no doubt. Bill
Okay.
Walsh, one of the most innovative coaches that ever lived.
Yeah, the West Coast offense, sure.
Well, it was the Cincinnati offense, but the offense had nothing to do with the West Coast. The offense was brought in 1970.
I know it was called the West Coast offense.
It wasn't called it back then. It was called it wasn't called anything. It was just called the offense where they throw the ball quick. But they did that because Greg Cook got hurt early in the 69 season. Their quarterback was Virgil Carter, who couldn't throw the ball more than 35 or 40 yards. They go to the West Coast offense in 1970. The Bengals with Virgil Carter, who couldn't throw a ball through a wet paper bag from 5 yards away, takes them, wins the division after starting out 1-6. 73, they make the playoffs, lose to the Dolphins, who win the Super Bowl. 75, they make the playoffs, lose to the Raiders, who were a great team that year. And then Paul Brown steps down, and instead of hiring Bill Walsh out of jealousy because he knew how good Walsh was and the fact that he promised a job to Bill Tiger Johnson, who'd been with him forever, he makes Bill Tiger Johnson the coach. Bill Walsh was actually blackballed from the NFL for 3 or 4 years because Paul Brown, when people would call and ask him for a recommendation, would basically talk shit and tell him not to hire Walsh. Walsh goes to Stanford, wins a bunch of games over a couple of years, and then he gets the job in San Francisco. Bill Walsh and Joe Montana are every bit as great as Bill Belichick and Tom Brady.
Okay.
The day and age is different.
I'll buy that.
I'll tell you this, over 21 years, a third of rosters change every year now on NFL teams. The 49ers didn't have that so much, but the 49ers also didn't have Jerry Rice until the 3rd Super Bowl. 16 and 19, there was no Jerry Rice, no John Taylor. Like Taylor might have been there for 19, but I'm not 100% sure. And if you look at this, I mean, the dude played like a perfect game against the Denver Broncos in Super Bowl 24. He played a perfect game in Super Bowl 19. He played 4 Super Bowls, never threw a pick. And one of those, he pulled an upset. Not many times was Brady an underdog, but the first time when they played the Bengals, I think the Bengals were a 2.5, 3-point favorite. It was one way or the other. It was close. But he wins that Super Bowl. But then you get to the other Super Bowl, Super Bowl 23. It was in the Super Bowl, the greatest last-minute drive I've ever seen, or last 3-minute drive. He gets the ball with a little over 3 minutes left. He goes 92 yards against the Bengals defense that had only allowed them to score 1 touchdown that day up until that point. And he walks them right down the field, and they win the game. So to me, they're 1 and 1A. You can put whichever one where you want to put them. But I think you have to realize what they achieved beyond just how many rings they won. And I think it was a lot harder to win a ring in the 80s than it is today. Number one, the talent is stretched out a lot more. You don't have 4 or 5 great teams in the NFC. Hell, I don't know that you have one. You don't have any great teams in the AFC. Chiefs and the Bengals and the Bills are all good teams, but they're not great teams. It's hard to be a great team now just because of expansion. More players are picked, nepotism picking coaches. I mean, if you just look at this Frank Reich, how the hell does he get another job? Steve Wilkes, how does he not have a job? Mm-hmm. I mean, you go through all of this, and I think you have to read into what they were. I mean, to me, Joe Montana and Bill Walsh were innovative as hell. I think Belichick and Brady were to a point. But I think this is a lot closer than people just screaming, he's got 7 and that's it. And if you give me any quarterback for 1 game ever to win that game, I'd take Terry Bradshaw.
Yeah, I was going to say, Mike, where do you throw Pittsburgh in with Noel and Bradshaw?
Well, remember this with Bradshaw. They won 4 Super Bowls in 6 years, and they beat all-time great teams. The Minnesota Vikings, you had the Purple People Eaters. Bradshaw throws a game-winning touchdown in the fourth quarter. They beat Roger Staubach in a doomsday defense twice. Terry Bradshaw throws a game-winning touchdown in both of them. They're down 19-17 to a great LA Rams team with a great defense. Nolan Cromwell, Jack Youngblood, Isaiah Robertson, all these guys. They're down 19-17. Bradshaw throws 2 touchdown passes to win the
Rosie
game.
Greer, Deacon Jones.
No, you're way off. That was early 70s.
Oh.
Jack Youngblood, Jim Youngblood, those guys then. But
Those
so
my age.
I think this is a lot closer to what people think it is. Am I nuts, Joe?
No.
Thanks.
Well, yeah, but not for those
Oh, yeah.
comments.
Well, I
Hey,
know
Mike. I'm the first one that said I don't know if I take Montana or Brady. I don't know.
Well, I wrote an article 2 years ago. You ripped me when I said I would take Montana in it, Steve, but that's all right.
Well, 2 years ago, I wasn't nearly as smart as you. Now I'm smarter.
My God, you made one smart comment in 8 years on these shows tonight, and now you're brilliant.
Brilliant.
I've always been brilliant. I just know how important it is for
just
you
hide it.
to have. It's important for you to have the basking in the sun syndrome. So I let you have it.
Uh-huh. Who was the Colts starting quarterback in the 1987 divisional playoff game against the Browns, Steve?
Mike Pagel.
Jack Trudeau.
No, that's close.
Isn't that the president of Canada?
Yes, it is. Very same guy. No, it's Jack Trudeau. And actually, it was Steve. You were right. I just didn't want to admit that you knew it. So, but Joe,
It was Pagel, wasn't it?
yeah, it was Pagel. Trudeau was like 2 years before that.
See, I'm smarter. 2 years ago, I would have said.
I think we've went through this question on the air probably 5 years ago, so you probably remember it.
No, I don't have dementia.
But all right, does anybody else have any comments before we wrap it up, or anything you want to talk about?
No.
Actually, yeah, just one quick thing, because Mike, you had asked if this was the easiest run that the Philadelphia Eagles went on to make it to a Super Bowl. Just want to throw out some quick facts because I've been looking it up, and I was actually surprised to see some of this shit. So for this year, just for comparison's sake, before I go to some of the other ones, the Eagles actually had the number one in terms of strength of schedule in the NFL with their opponent.
No, you need to stop with this because the 49ers had no quarterbacks.
Hold on.
Give me an easier one. Give me an easier path. Just give me one. I'm tired of waiting.
Okay, fine. I'll give you an easy one. 2008 Pittsburgh Steelers. They played no one in the playoffs. I mean, no one at all.
But
They had one of the easiest runs in the playoffs. They played a Chargers team that wasn't quite right. They played an Arizona Cardinals team in the Super Bowl that was 9-7. They went on a great one, Arizona did, but let's be honest. A 9-7 team making the Super Bowl, no one's really impressed by that.
Well, last year the Bengals were 10-7. The LA Rams in 1979 were a great team that were 9-7, but injuries hurt them earlier in the year. I don't think you could say this is an easier run when you had to beat Phillip Rivers and you had to beat when Joe Flacco was good, the Baltimore Ravens.
Do the Steelers have the second most Super Bowl wins in
Nobody
the history?
knows.
No. A Super
Tom
Bowl.
Brady
win.
has the most.
Yes.
Yeah, Patriots got what, 7, 6, because Brady won.
Are the
7.
Steelers trying to get one for the thumb? I don't remember. They got 5 or 6.
Yeah, the Steelers have the most.
Yeah, but I still think this, Dan. I think having to beat the Baltimore Ravens with Ray Lewis, Joe Flacco is probably a little bit tougher than beating Brock Purdy when he can't throw.
Again, that's a fair point, but
And also the Chargers were. You say they weren't right, but the Chargers beat the number 1 seed, the Colts, the week before, and the Chargers were a pretty good team, and that was a decently close game. So I don't think when you compared, you're going to tell me the 2008 Chargers with Phillip Rivers and with Junior Seau. That Seau was gone, I think. But LaDainian Tomlinson, you really think that they're worse than the New York Giants this year?
I mean, the 08 Steelers, their cumulative winning percentage of the teams that they played in the postseason was one of the lowest in the Super Bowl.
The Chargers were 8-8, I think, weren't they?
Yeah, something like that.
That's the year they upset the Indianapolis Colts. I'm still saying that Chargers team would have beat the hell out of this Giants team.
Plus, I mean, I was looking at some other stuff. I went back to the 70s. I mean, this would fit right into your wheelhouse, Steve. 1970 Colts, one of the easiest regular season schedules ever played. Their winning percentage of their opponents was .352, which
but in the playoffs they had to beat a good Bengals team and a good Raiders team.
And the playoffs, the playoff, and I think you could kind of gauge sometimes how a team performs in the regular season. But once you get to the playoffs, it's a different ball game. I mean, the year before that, Dan, the 2007 Giants, they were horrible. They were 9-7 going into the postseason.
They were good in the playoffs.
But yeah, their 07 run, the Giants 07 run.
Yeah, they knocked off the undefeated Patriots.
When you talk about the 70 Colts, they beat a good Bengals team 17-0 in a divisional playoff. I think the AFC Championship game, they beat the Raiders when they had Darryl LaMonica and had been in the Super Bowl a year or two before. So I'm not talking about regular season. I'm just talking about to get to the Super Bowl, the playoffs. And I don't think you're ever going to find in the 70s where you had this easy a playoff run because you only had one wild card.
I mean, the Packers back in the day only needed to win 2 games.
There's a time where the Packers only didn't have to win any playoff games. They were just in the championship game, but they won their conference. They didn't have to start winning playoff games against Dallas. I don't think that came into play until like 1964 or 5. I think it was 1965. Not 100% sure. Because I know in 1960 when they lost to the Philadelphia Eagles and Lombardi's only loss, that was the game where there was no playoff game before it. In 61, they blew out the Giants like 31-7. There was no playoff game before that. 62 was a closer Packer-Giant championship game. 63, you had the Giants-Bears. There was no playoff going into that. 64, you had the Browns and Packers, or the Browns and Colts. 65, Browns and Packers. I think right around there. I think it was 66. Probably the Super Bowl years is the first time they really had playoffs. Unless you had a complete tie and they would play a playoff game to see who went to the championship game.
Mike, I just got to say, your mind with you're like a Rain Man with old NFL stats and information.
I'm Rain Man, yeah. I can't tell you who won in the playoffs the first weekend this year, but I can tell you every damn thing that happened before 1990.
It's a steel trap, man. It's impressive. It's very impressive.
That's actually a sign of a stroke. Are you okay?
What?
Oh, Joe.
I've already had 5 of those. That's fine.
It's fine.
All right, guys. Anything else before we wrap it up? Anybody want to know about the 1972 season or anything?
Not right now, no.
Okay. Well, if y'all ever want to, we'll start doing a history of pro football show. We'll go through the years.
Can't wait.
That way you youngins can learn stuff me and Steve already knew. Once again, the MVP tonight was Steve Risley with his great comment on the personal fouls. And the dumbass of the night would be Dan, just because he's Dan.
Pew, pew, pew.
All right, guys, make sure you follow us at Grilly Truth. Also, remember, betting.net finds the best promotions, offers, and bonus codes so you don't have to. Check them out now at betting.net. And also, remember, if you like social casino, shut up! I'm reading a commercial. Sign up with stake.us and use our exclusive promo code TGTSocial to secure your unique 5% rate back bonus. Steve Risley, the floor is yours.
I just want to know, does that make Joe Mr. Irrelevant?
No.
Yeah, that makes him not a dumbass and not very smart. He's in the
Mr. Irrelevant.
That's good.
Wow, I guess it would be. Nah.
Yeah,
you're Mr. Irrelevant. You're like Brock Purdy. Can you throw?
Maybe I'll take the Grueling Truth to the championship game next year then.
Woo!
That'd be nice. The officials will screw us, though.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
All right, guys. We'll be back next Wednesday night for our Super Bowl preview. You can follow us at Grilling Truth. Make sure you like and subscribe on YouTube. Check out betting.net. Check out stake.us. Promo code TGTSocial. But for now, for Dan Kornhauser, Steve Risley, Joe Spillman, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been watching and listening to The Grilling Truth, where the NFL